Hey everybody, it's the Dreamer's Edge podcast, starring
Nicholas, I do research in astrophysics.
and Dimitri, webmaster of thedreamersedge.com and movie critic. And today, we're going to answer a question from one of our readers. And that question is from Ryan. He asks, are you going to do DC? Now, by that I assume that he's not asking if we're going to sleep with Dan Didio, but rather if we're going to do for DC what we did with Marvel, which is to say, go through the entire list of movies based on characters from that publishing house. The answer to that is yes. And if you had asked when, and you should have, Ryan, the answer is now.
So it's only going to be theatrical releases, no cartoons, and no direct-to-DVD movies. First one, a lot earlier than Marvel, came out in 1966, and was Batman.
Based on the TV show
Yes.
with Adam West.
In Burt Ward.
Na 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 na. Batman and Robin. Oh no, wait, just Batman.
Alright, fine. Just Batman. Adam West. And he faces four bad guys, if I remember correctly. The Riddler, Catwoman, I think the Joker was there. And who was the fourth one?
Penguin.
Yes, because they're going into the penguin submarine, who looks like a penguin flapping his legs at the end there to propose a submarine.
Like, one of the things that today's fans don't acknowledge is that, yes, Batman, the TV show, was ridiculous, but it was intentionally ridiculous. It was played as a comedy. It wasn't taking itself as a serious action series.
He has like bat shark repellent. And not only that, but Robin looks at a bunch of them, and he has a bunch of different repellents. That's pretty funny.
That movie's great, man. It doesn't stop. All of the jokes are funny. History has not been kind to it because people, they want a serious Batman. I completely agree. I certainly wouldn't want, that to be revived as the new direction for Batman after Nolan is done with The Dark Knight Rises in 2012,
You don't want Christian Bale to hit somebody and it appears pow on the big screen. Wouldn't that be awesome?
With the Hans Zimmer music too. It's just Christian Bale in his very clunky batsuit going down a fire pole. I'm not sure that would work for me.
So after Batman, DC went with their other big superhero, and they did Superman in '78.
Richard Donner's Superman, which is today still held as a classic. The marketing campaign, for those of you who remember, I don't, because I wasn't really born at the time, but was You Will Believe a Man Can Fly. And I think that promotional campaign was just so evocative. You can do that before, and Superman, I think, really sold it. I think it still holds up in terms of that spectacle of the wonder of how cool would it be to be Superman.
Yes. The action, not so much. I mean, even when I watched that movie when I was a young kid, him flying backwards around the Earth to spin it backwards, I thought it was stupid.
Well, it's because not only does it not make sense, on a scientific level, because really, when you think about the implications of that, it means that I could redo all of my bad decisions by turning left very quickly. But it also doesn't work dramatically, because it, of course, leaves the question of why don't you do it all the time?
Exactly. That was not satisfying for me, but, as a spectacle, it's a very nice movie. I can see it's Superman, you see him,
He's charming.
He is, charming as hell.
Yeah, because hell is known for its charm. Margot Kidder, I think, is?
Yeah.
Yep. And Christopher Reeves are an absolute delight. Because the movie is actually fairly slow if you rewatch it. Richard Donner's Superman, trucks along at a very leisurely pace.
Yeah.
At the beginning, when it's dealing with his parents and his childhood, and as a comic fan where I know that story by heart, it is not particularly interesting. Yeah. And I start losing patience a little bit. But once Lois shows up, and it's just him and her bouncing off each other, making sexual innuendos after sexual innuendos. They really do that a lot.
Yeah.
It's so charming. It's so much fun. I could watch a movie till the cows come home.
And he actually made it work that, the way, he acts as Clark Kent and as Superman, completely different. You can actually make it see, I can see why nobody sees it, because it's a completely different person, even with just the glasses. Yeah, okay.
Christopher Reeve does a great job of holding back his charisma. I didn't know you could do that, but he does.
Yeah.
It's a great, great movie, and I agree with you. The action is lame. Not a big fan of this version of Lex Luthor, I will say. The comedic Lex Luthor, played by Gene Hackman, never been my favorite take on it.
Yeah, me neither. Well, it was followed up 2 years later with Superman 2.
And that one's fixed it all, because what they did is they kept that dynamic between the two actors.
Yeah.
And sort of downplayed Lex Luthor a little bit so that they would be placed for real villains that can deliver real action, essentially, is what they did.
Basically 3 bad guys from Krypton that show up to Earth.
The story behind it is actually kind of peculiar, because Richard Donner did most of the work for that movie, and they booted him out.
Oh, that's cold.
Halfway through, and placed the other director who sort of re-pieced together the scenes in a completely different sequence and made the movie that we all know and love.
I see.
Obviously, he did a terrific job. Everybody loves Superman 2 above all the other Supermen.
Yeah.
So I can't really fault the producers for making that decision. Obviously, they made the right decision. They have released in DVD the Richard Donner Superman.
Okay.
It has not been well received. I will admit that I have not seen it.
Okay.
I don't really have that much interest in it because I live in the now.
So we'll move right along to Superman 3 in 1983.
Yeah, this is the first movie for me that makes for a rule that still applies to this day, which is superhero movies work like this. The first one is good. The second one is awesome. And the third one, it all goes to hell.
Yeah, I think it's a good rule. Can't think of any exception to that rule yet.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, Richard Pryor, bad guy, using evil computers, because technology is evil, of course. That did not make sense to me at all, and it was horrible.
Yeah, no, the thing with Superman is, like, did they not notice what worked in Superman 2 that made it better than Superman 1, or at least more fun for a lot of people?
Yeah.
Is they toned down the comedic aspects from the villains. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, yes, Superman should be light and fun, but the villains don't have to be.
Yeah, that's true. Zod was evil. He wanted to control Earth. He wasn't, throwing out one-liners like that, and trying to make people fun. He was the bad guy you had to, beat, and he was as strong as Superman, and that's what made him for a good bad guy.
Yeah, and that's it. And they had freaking Richard Pryor. He was a god of comedy. Absolutely. I have nothing but absolute admiration for Richard Pryor as an artist and performer. But he's the last guy I wanted to see in a Superman movie. And, the freaking computers that... I always remember the scene where there's one woman who gets, like, computerized, if you will, like, with pieces of metal over her, and she looks like a prop from Mannequin 3 Terminator's Attack. She looked ridiculous with the frizzy hair but the metallic face. It looked dumb as all get out.
I remember even for back then, the special effects were not that great. In Superman 2, they did with what they had, and they had like superhuman people fighting, and they didn't go overboard and trying to dazzle you with special effects. In Superman 3, I think that's what they tried to do, and it looked ridiculous.
The 80s also suffers from one thing, is that computers were starting to hit the home market. And so people were really, passionate and afraid of computers and all these wonderful things that they could do. So all the bad guys were always computers in the 80s,
Yeah.
And what we learned, by the end of the 80s and certainly entering into the 90s is that computers are really boring on movies because it's a typewriter with a screen, It's like, what are you going to do with that cinematically, You can film it from the back, you can film it from the side, and you can film it from the front. So you have 3 shots available for directors to make that exciting,
And they didn't even have screensavers back then, so the screen couldn't be exciting at all. It was just nothing.
Oh, that's right, because it was all DOS. It's like it's black and has green lighting. Oh!
Next, the following year, we have Supergirl.
A lame Superman, but with fairies and stuff.
Yeah, with magic all of a sudden, and I was maybe younger, but I could not follow what was happening. And all of a sudden she's fighting a witch, and then she ends up with another guy that you saw at the beginning of the movie, and then she leaves that place to fight what is happening here?
Well, it's the reason why you couldn't get it as a kid is for the same reason why I couldn't follow it as a kid either, is because we're boys. And that movie was addressed with kids with vaginas. We're making the Superman movie for girls, so we're gonna put what girls love. It's like, it was this close to having Supergirl ride a unicorn, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It's so girly, it's adorable.
Not going to rewatch it to try and get it then.
Well, as an adult, you can watch it as in terms of, as a father, would you watch this with your daughter and think it's pretty cool? And yeah, I would. But, watching it for the first time as a kid, I was like you. I'm a boy and I'm watching this going like, what's going on here? When is a robot going to show up and beat stuff up?
Yeah, good point. Following this, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace in 1987.
Okay, well, if Superman 3 was bad, Superman 4 was worthy of direct-to-video, let's just say. I actually think the story is better than Superman 3.
Yeah, at least he's fighting a super being that has some superpowers. Superman gets a few new powers, rebuilding the wall of China with his eyes. Not quite sure where that came from.
Well, it shoots a red beam, you have to understand. That powers China's inherent communism, which allows it to build stuff.
Actually, the red beam destroyed the wall. The blue beam fixed it.
Really?
Yes. One scene I loved. He gets beaten by the bad guy, but the bad guy doesn't kill him. He just, gives him the cold for some reason. And then they meet again, and the bad guy is in love with a human, and he starts destroying everything around Superman until, he brings him to that human. And Superman just yells, no, don't do this, no. I'm like, you're Superman, do something about it.
Well, although the cold is from the comics, it's the effects of turquoise kryptonite.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I totally just made that up.
I would believe that because they have so much kryptonite in the comics.
Oh, the one thing about Quest for Peace I want to mention. I mentioned it was worthy of direct-to-video. It's mostly the budget and special effects, because Superman 3 didn't do as well as it should have, so they had a considerably smaller budget for the fourth one. Yeah. And my favorite part of it is when they start tossing around the Statue of the Liberty to each other.
Yeah. And
for some reason, they all grab it and catch it from the same spot.
2 years later, we have Batman.
This was the year of the Batman, just in terms of the marketing campaign of that one, I think is worth mentioning, because everything was Batman. Well, more specifically, everything was Bat symbol back then. I remember going into Canadian store alert, Zellers, and just everywhere, every t-shirt, every baseball cap, every pajamas, towels, everything, it was Batman symbol everywhere. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember it. I guess since Superman was kind of dead, they really wanted to push a new series out. So I'm guessing that's why the marketing went really overboard, because I do remember the marketing a lot.
I mean, in fairness, it worked. The movie was a huge success.
Yeah.
Unprecedented. Certainly for what is, to a certain degree, an art house movie. You know what I mean? If you look at the design of Batman.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, and that was never done before.
Yeah.
First of all, kudos to Tim Burton for having the vision and dare to do that. Not crazy about the story, I have to say.
Yeah. Was there a story? Or was it just gorgeous and that's it?
The thing of it is, I don't like the interpretation of the characters. Tim Burton has gone on record that he's never read a comic.
Well, there wasn't any internet back then. Well, internet wasn't that big, so he couldn't have gotten, pushed out of the project.
I would have loved if the internet had this big backlash back then, because it would have meant high-level diplomats and military people were losing their cool over Batman the movie and communicating over these private channels. But yeah, because he has Batman as sort of an everyman, which is a little bit weird. He's rich, but he doesn't play it rich. He plays it I'm the humble rich guy.
Yeah, that's true.
And he has the goofy haircut, which is exactly the same one as Tim Burton's haircut.
Huh.
Back in the day. And then you have the Joker, who's not really the Joker so much as the evil side of Tim Burton, where he's this artist who wants to express himself and sees beauty in what is ugly, but he goes overboard and turns everything into his Joker art, and he's sort of a misunderstood monster that way. But there's another man who also understands the glory and monstrosity, because he dresses up as a bat, but he understands where to draw the line. It's all this big dichotomy in the mind of Tim Burton. With a multi-billion-dollar franchise and industry, you're I don't know, it seems a little bit self-indulgent to me, just a tiny bit,
I didn't know all that background thing, so to me it was just, the Joker was a little weird, didn't act quite like the Joker, but I thought it worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Batman was fine. Like you said, he wasn't really Bruce Wayne. He was don't look at me and don't think of me as Batman. Even as Bruce Wayne, I could see Batman there.
He's Tim Burton. And I'm serious, he's sort of artsy and shy and a little bit uncomfortable with women and a little bit, I'm kind of a recluse and I don't communicate well until I embrace my monstrosity, and then I can get the chick and achieve amazing things.
Wow. That is pretty self-indulgent if that's what happened. That's pretty bad. And
I met you as a kid, so I didn't have the best judgment then. I didn't believe in Santa Claus, so I was ahead of the curve there. When I heard Michael Keaton as Batman, I was like, Beetlejuice? But looking back, he does such an amazing job. He brings about that intensity and that craziness that it takes to be a guy who dresses up like a bat. And you wouldn't have Christian Bale Batman today without, the intensity of Michael Keaton's performance, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree, that's true. It was followed up 3 years later with Batman Returns in 1992.
And this is a nice time to kind of point out that I kind of dig DC not doing the Marvel thing of trying to pop them out as fast as humanly possible. I mentioned in the previous podcast that like Marvel realized that the studios weren't treating their characters well. That was a simplification. What actually happened with Marvel is that Marvel realized that by using a third party to make their movies, they weren't making as much money as they could. That's actually what Marvel realized. DC, of course, doesn't have that problem because DC is actually owned by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So, it's a straight line to make the movies, and I love that, they're just taking their time, and so far the track record is pretty solid.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
And Batman Returns made a lot of money. It was a success, but it was the one that fans really hate.
Well, there are some parts of the movie I hated, but I thought it was a good movie. Danny DeVito as the Penguin, he was fine.
Oh, I thought he was terrific.
Yeah.
Even though the design of the character is completely the opposite of the comic book character, strangely, Danny DeVito actually, he must have read the comics, behind Tim Burton's back, because he does play it with the same heart that the comic book character has, in the sense that he's a man with an inferiority complex that keeps trying to make up for it by trying to sound more distinguished than he is, but because he doesn't have the education, he always comes off vulgar instead. And he does that very well, Danny DeVito.
Yeah. Catwoman I was not crazy about.
Really, she for me was a total revelation. Absolutely love Michelle Pfeiffer in that.
Maybe because I was still kind of a kid and I didn't get the sexy part of it, and I didn't quite like her character. I didn't get why everybody was crazy about her in the movie.
Because she's bat poop crazy, and she plays it really well as this sort of like embodiment of feminist frustration.
As a kid, I didn't get that.
That was your age.
Yeah, but you're movie crazy, and let's have a debate about video games, and I'll destroy you. Movies, I didn't see these things as a kid.
Yeah. I absolutely adore it, to be perfectly honest. It's one of my favorite superhero movies, hands down. I see the flaws. Like, it's one of those movies where I rate it lower than I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It is not Batman at this point. It is totally into the Tim Burton verse. The fight choreographies in that one are so weird and kooky. Like, there's a clown that shows up in front of Batman and goes like, da da da, and then Batman reaches into his mouth, gets a sword out of the mouth, and then beats the clown with it. And you're like, it's so cool and fun and quirky and super fun, but like, if you stop and think, it's like, that doesn't make an ounce of sense. Like, this is so surreal.
All right. It's followed up again 3 years later with Batman Forever.
Now that went gangbusters. That was a huge hit.
Yeah.
I can't say I hated it. It's not the Batman I wanted to see. I was very attached with Tim Burton's Batman at that point.
Yeah. I did not need Batman to fall back down to the 60s version. We had moved on from that, and it's a good reproduction, but I think the Riddler was like even more over the top, and he didn't have to be, got crazy, but that was Jim Carrey, I think, overplaying it.
Yeah, his performance is completely off, because if you look at Tommy Lee Jones, he's doing Cesar Romero. He's doing the, what if Two-Face was in the 60s show? He'd be a cackling madman, and he's playing that same kind of cackling madman. He nails it.
Yeah.
But Jim Carrey is completely on the wrong note. He's just being loud. He's not being campy.
Yeah.
I will say, I can't bring myself to completely hate any movie that has Nicole Kidman looking as drop-dead gorgeous as she does in this movie.
Oh, yeah, she was awesome.
I remember watching it in theaters. 3 guys behind me, early 20s, late 20s. It's hard to gauge because I was younger. There's a scene in the Batman Forever where Nicole Kidman is in her bed, and she sort of arcs her back, and her butt sort of sticks out under the sheets, and then she gets up, and with that gorgeous flowing blonde hair that looked a little bit plastic in retrospect, but and all 4 of us in the theater went like, oh. And that's when I knew I was a man.
2 years later, Batman and Robin in 1997. That one I did not like.
You can see that Joel Schumacher, who did Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, was feeling more confident about, sharing his vision of Batman. Because that scene where they pop the bat skates out.
Yeah, the bat skates. Wow, that came out of nowhere.
There was 4 of us. Yeah. This is at that point that 3 just went like, oh, this movie's crap. And that same moment I was like, this movie's gonna be awesome. It's like Superman flying backwards in the sense of like, you fly against the rotation of the Earth far long enough or fast enough, you reach a point where you achieve magical time warping abilities.
Yeah.
Like that for me was a sign of like, we may reach that with Batman and Robin.
So the movie is so bad that it's going to become good.
Exactly, it reaches good from the other end.
Yeah. Did that happen?
No, not quite, unfortunately. Because, again, if it had been, 1966 Batman campy, the way that Joel Schumacher deliberately staged the Bat skates, and certainly the Bat credit card, which is one of my favorite moments in that movie.
Yeah.
Because, again, it looks campy and stupid, but if you think of it in terms of this is Batman 1966 comedy, it's like, yeah, that is like the shark repellent joke,
Yeah, this Bat credit card. Seriously?
Yeah.
That's funny.
It really is.
I mean, what's her
Uma Thurman, who did Poison Ivy.
She was playing it way too serious. Actually,
Arnold
didn't do a bad job of playing it campy. He just didn't fit because the other bad guys were playing it so serious that his campiness was like, okay, well, I can see you being campy there, but the other two are too serious. So you just look ridiculous.
But I find that he didn't play quite the same joke, so it didn't work for me. Where he was playing campy, but he wasn't playing retro campy, and you needed a retro campy for the joke to work.
Yeah. And George Clooney was the bad. The same year, Steel. And again, it was a flavor of the month. Shaquille O'Neal was, popular. He had Shaq Fu video game, and he was rapping as well.
And it has that Genie movie. What was it again?
Shazam.
Ah, that's what it was.
And yeah, he was the flavor of the month. So let's try and come out with movies with him. So Steel.
Because he's, the only black DC superhero they could find, I guess. I'm not as familiar with DC lore. I'm sure they must have more than that.
Isn't one of the Green Lanterns black?
Yeah, but that doesn't count because there's like one black Green Lantern for 4 white Green Lanterns. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But, man, that movie, you should watch it. It's fun to make fun of.
Is it?
Yeah, grab a bunch of friends, a bunch of beers, and get drunk a little bit, and then watch it.
I might take you up on that.
After this god-awful mess...
It's not an unholy mess?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because Marvel had a lot of those, apparently.
Yes, they did.
We've gotten letters for our Marvel podcast where we've mentioned unholy mess an awful lot.
So, after this mess of Steel... it took 7 years to come out with another mess.
A mess of steel? That must be impossible to clean up.
It took 7 years to come out with Catwoman.
You know what else took 7 years to come out? Me stopping long enough for you to actually get the title of the movie out. Yeah.
So I think apparently the story of that movie is that Halle Berry's hot. And that's the story of Catwoman.
No. The story of it is the same origin as Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman.
Okay.
Except she's working for a cosmetics company because, girls. And, the Christopher Walken character is replaced by Sharon Stone.
That's not a good replacement, honestly. You want to keep Christopher Walken as much as you can in every movie you have.
Yeah, but you have a movie called Catwoman, you want a cat fight.
I guess so. So anything else about Catwoman?
It was bad.
Now we're entering the age of reboots with Batman Begins in 2005.
I had been rooting for Christian Bale as Batman since I had seen American Psycho. Like, I came out of American Psycho going like, this dude should do Batman. He'll be amazing as Batman. And I was so happy when he came out.
I thought that when he was playing Equilibrium.
Didn't Equilibrium come out after?
I know, I'm just messing with you.
But the movie that actually really confirmed to me that he should play Batman, Batman Begins, oddly enough.
Morgan Freeman was great as well, giving Batman all his gear. The bad guy was good too, Liam Neeson.
Oh yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn was actually really well transported into that context.
Yeah, and the only thing I didn't quite like was Katie Holmes. I don't hate her, but looking back, having seen the new Rachel, she's not that good, really.
Yeah, but Gyllenhaal is such an amazing actress.
Yeah, she knows how to smile too.
No, she knows how to smile, but also she has enough charisma to hold her own next to, Aaron Eckhart and Christian Bale. Because that was the big problem with Katie Holmes, she's a competent actress. Okay, she does have a few awkward moments where she does the mistake of a lot of young actresses do, which is that they confuse confidence with bitchiness. So that when she tries to go into the Arkham Island there, if you had played the character as confident, she would have just showed up and go like, let me pass, I'm a DA, not I'm a DA, sass all the way through, you know? But the biggest problem with her is that she doesn't have the charisma to stand next to Michael Caine and Christian Bale without them looking mildly patronizing.
Yeah. And a lot of people complained about the Batmobile, and I liked it. I thought it was, functional. The highway scene with it was pretty cool. And so just that scene was worth it having it in the movie. I don't see people complaining it doesn't look like the Batmobile. It looks fine.
But it's not supposed to be the Batmobile either, because this is Batman Begins, not Batman has his poop down, you know? He is at that point just stealing technology from the military, so the Tumbler looks like a military vehicle painted black.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the weirdness of why does he have to duck to go faster like that? It's like, I don't understand the logic of that.
No, he ducks to shoot, not to go faster.
You see, that doesn't make any more sense.
I know, but, Following that, another reboot, Superman Returns in 2006.
Yeah, Bryan Singer, who passed on doing X-Men 3 to do Superman Returns. And I can understand that decision because it's different, and it's an opportunity. With the Marvel podcast, we complained a lot about fan mentality getting in the way of creativity. Yeah. I think we came off a little bit more aggressive than I had meant to. But I do still maintain the opinion that as a creator, you have to put the fan aside, Fans should enjoy the work. They shouldn't create it. And Bryan Singer was a big Richard Donner Superman fan. And you can tell, because, again, you have that problem that Peo mentioned with Marvel, where the trees sort of are getting in the way of the forest. I really dislike Superman Returns. I think it misses the point of Superman.
I went seeing that, hoping to see maybe an action movie, hoping maybe that they could get what they had back in Superman 2. And the only thing Superman does is lift things, the whole movie.
I know.
Lifting things is not exciting. Oh, can I lift this? Can I lift this? I'm going to try and lift this.
Well, it's also inconsistent because he strains every time he lifts stuff, but he keeps lifting heavier and heavier stuff. Spoiler alert, if you're lifting a continent, really lifting a car shouldn't make you strain. Like, it's...
He had a bad grip on it. That's why he was straining. He wasn't using his back.
I will say, absolutely love Parker Posey and Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor and his sidekick there.
Yeah.
They were the highlight of the movie.
Yeah, they were fun.
Yeah.
So when you're bored about other stuff, you look towards what's fun. They were really fun,
Yeah, well, my biggest problem with Superman Returns actually is the moral implications, because everybody's sort of morally compromised in that, Like, okay, first of all, the story goes, Superman sleeps with Lois, then bolts to his home planet, presumably to brag, I'm not sure. I banged a human chick. Then comes back 5 years later, sees that she's married and has a child, and goes like, I'm gonna break up that marriage.
Wow.
It's just, for me, Superman, and this I hold very dear, because Superman I do think is one of the greatest comic book creations ever. And a lot of people will disagree, and when we do a Superman-specific podcast, we can talk a bit more about that. But for me, Superman is about truth, justice, and the American way. Not one-night stand, breaking up families, and lifting crap. Like, that is not Superman to me.
Well, we're going to have, Superman Returns 2. He pushes stuff instead of lifting it.
Yeah.
2 years later, we have The Dark Knight in 2008.
Oh, what a piece of crap that was. Like, Heath Ledger, get off the screen.
Oh, he's so horrible.
Low point in his career completely.
I mean, I can't believe he got an Oscar for that. What were they smoking?
I know. David Spade totally got robbed for that Oscar.
So now I guess we're moving to movie... No, there's another one. Came out, 2010. Jonah Hex.
Are you familiar with the Jonah Hex comics at all?
No, not at all.
Jonah Hex is a Western comics taking place after the Civil War. He's an ex-Confederate soldier.
Okay.
And he's sort of saving people as this deformed vagabond. Again, people who are familiar with the podcast might have heard Frank's comment on that, where he sort of disapproves with it because it places the ex-Confederate soldier as the good guy, and it sort of shows the abuses that took place during the war, often by both sides,
Yeah.
And Frank sort of objects to that because he thinks it's glorifying the Confederacy. And I don't agree with that. I think there were abuses on both sides during the war, and he's a Confederate soldier doesn't mean he embodies the spirit of Confederacy,
That's a good point.
Having said that, I'm talking about the comics in a way that's at the level of the interest and conversation you can have about the comics. You can't quite have the same conversation about the movie. which has him as a supernatural cowboy fighter with a magical hell gun, rescuing the half-Indian Megan Fox, who's also a prostitute, from an evil man who killed his family. It was like they just took the name and attached a really, really weird and goofy movie. I like to call it Wild Wild West 2, personally.
That's it for the list.
Yeah, alright. Let's move on to something I like to call the Electric Boogaloo Factory. For those of you wondering, the Electric Boogaloo Factory is when we take a franchise that doesn't deserve a sequel and make a sequel out of it. And since we are doing this in response to our Marvel list, we thought we would do Marvel versus DC the movie. Why? Because it's never going to happen in real life. Yeah. So why not do it at the Electric Boogaloo Factory?
Well, my vision is, since DC seems to only have Batman and Superman, that's going to be the DC team.
What are we, like, upcoming is the 8th Batman movie.
It's Batman and Superman are like 80% of DC's movies. Whereas Marvel is going to have all their superheroes, like Spider-Man, Captain America, Thor, and so forth. So I'm seeing Thor kicking Superman's ass, and the rest of the Marvel heroes kicking Batman's ass, and the end.
All of those that appeared in the 20-some movies just ganging up on the guy.
But Superman's harder, because I guess only Thor can hang with him, so, that'd be a cool fight to see. That would take maybe like an hour and a half, and like 2 minutes of people just punching Batman in a big pile.
All of them, all the X-Men characters, the Spider-Man villains as well. And like Thor turning around at one point going like, "Are not thee going to lend a hand?" Alright then, that's enough. If you have any questions, comments, you want to share with us what your favorite DC movies or the least favorite DC movies are, we do have a website. It's thedreamersedge.com. If you want to get directly to the podcast, that's /multimedia. Find this episode, post a comment, share with us your thoughts, share with us your feedback. As you can see, we answer questions. And we promise not to make fun of you unless you really deserve it.
Exactly.
See you next time.
Gnarly to the max. So after Batman, DC went with their other big superhero, and they did Superman in '78.
Richard Donner's Superman, which is today still held as a classic. The marketing campaign, for those of you who remember, I don't, because I wasn't really born at the time, but was "You will believe a man can fly." And I think that promotional campaign was just so evocative. You can do that before, and Superman, I think, really sold it. I think it still holds up in terms of that spectacle of the wonder of how cool would it be to be Superman.
Yes. The action, not so much. I mean, even when I watched that movie when I was a young kid, him flying backwards around the Earth to spin it backwards, I thought it was stupid.
Well, it's because not only does it not make sense, on a scientific level, because really it was ridiculous, but it was intentionally ridiculous. It was played as a comedy. It wasn't taking itself as a serious action series.
He has like bat shark repellent. And not only that, but Robin looks at a bunch of them, and he has a bunch of different propellants. That's pretty funny.
That movie's great, man. It doesn't stop. All of the jokes are funny. History has not been kind to it because people, they want a serious Batman. I completely agree. I certainly wouldn't want that to be revived as the new direction for Batman after Nolan is done with The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, You
don't want Christian Bale to hit somebody and it appears pow on the big screen? Wouldn't that be awesome?
With the Hans Zimmer music too. It's just Christian Bale in his very clunky batsuit going down a fire pole. I'm not sure that would work for me. When you think about the implications of that, it means that I could redo all of my bad decisions by turning left very quickly. But it also doesn't work dramatically because it, of course, leaves the question of why don't you do it all the time?
Exactly. That was not satisfying for me, but as a spectacle, it's a very nice movie. I can see it's Superman. You see him,
he's charming.
He is, charming as hell.
Yeah, because hell is known for its charm. Margot Kidder, I think is.
Yeah.
Yep. And Christopher Reeves are an absolute delight. Because the movie is actually fairly slow if you rewatch it. Richard Donner's Superman trucks along at a very leisurely pace.
Yeah.
At the beginning, when it's dealing with his parents and his childhood, and as a comic fan where I know that story by heart, it is not
So it's only going to be theatrical releases, no cartoons, and no direct-to-DVD movies. First one, a lot earlier than Marvel, came out in 1966, and was Batman.
Based on the TV show
Yes.
with Adam West.
And Burt Ward.
Na 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 na. Batman and Robin. Oh no, wait, just Batman.
All right, fine, just Batman, Adam West. And he faces 4 bad guys, if I remember correctly. The Riddler, Catwoman, I think the Joker was there. And who was the 4th one?
Penguin.
Yes, because they're going into the Penguin submarine, who looks like a penguin flapping his legs at the end there to propose a submarine.
Like, one of the things that today's fans don't acknowledge is that, yes, Batman, the TV show. Hey everybody, it's the Dreamer's Edge podcast, starring
Nicholas, I do research in astrophysics.
and Dimitri, webmaster of theatrical and movie critic. And today, we're going to answer a question from one of our readers. And that question is from Ryan. He asks, are you going to do DC? Now, by that I assume that he's not asking if we're going to sleep with Dan Didio, but rather, if we're going to do for DC what we did with Marvel, which is to say, go through the entire list of movies based on characters from that publishing house. The answer to that is yes. And if you had asked when, and you should have, Ryan, the answer is now.